next month, we'll bring back an updated policy for your recommendation for approval to the DA board. And we'll have some time to think on this. If you see something else that is glaring at you that we need to have another look at, we'll have another look. As Eric pointed out, we're not going to stop what we've been doing in the past. But we want to get this one right before we move it on to the DA board for full approval. So with that, it is just about time for Finance Committee to jump in, and we have several other items on our agenda. They are all in your packet. I don't believe there's anything that we really need to highlight. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to add about this conversation before we move on?
Say, Mary, I would, this is Eric, I would just add, if people do have other thoughts on this, feel free in the meantime to share those with Martin or myself, and we can, or John, and we can try to triangulate all the feedback, and look forward to working with the group next month.
Great, wonderful. Is there anything, anybody else?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just was curious if we could get an updated membership list to this committee. I know that there's been some changes in membership, and people, it's hard when we're not face to face to know exactly who's on this committee.
Yeah, I can provide an updated list for you, Jenny. I will get one ready and send it out to the group.
You're the best. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Anyone else? Eric, is there anything on items 6 through 10 that we need to be aware of?
Those
other
are
than the
mostly,
fact that they're in your packet?
Yeah, I think they're primarily placeholder items. I think it's important to look over the informational points. The rest of it is just an opportunity for status updates. Nothing critical.
Okay. And are there any special meetings or anything coming up in the next month that we need to be aware of for land swaps or anything that will need immediate attention?
Every meeting with you is special, Commissioner. We don't have any special scheduled meetings. So.
Okay. Is there any other business? Okay, then I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Breitling, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Captain, second.
Thank you very much, Jim. Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
I'm a little bit late, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Dawn, would you please call roll of members, please?
Mayor Dardis.
Present.
Dr. Mahoney. Mr. Peterson. Mr. Hendrickson. Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Costin. Ms. Johnson. Mr. Montplaisir.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Gehrig. Ms. McCall. Okay, we are short 2 committee members for a quorum.
Don, would you take a look and see if anybody has joined us?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Because
get
of
it.
because of the transition from lands.
Yeah, Bernie, you're in here twice, by the way. That's not going to work. You can't count yourself twice.
You got me.
Is Chad Peterson in the meeting?
He did not
He
answer
says
the
he-
roll, and he is not on the list of attendees right now.
He
Ms.
just-
McCall just joined
he-
the meeting.
He
Yes,
texted me and said
Carla
he's
McCall is
waiting.
here.
Don
Don, come on.
said he's waiting in the lobby. I don't see him though.
Yeah, this is Lori. I had to call in because I'm still waiting in the lobby and nobody let me in to get my phone hooked up. So I actually called in, but I'm still waiting in the lobby on
I'm
Teams.
not seeing you here.
I can cancel out of there, but I've already called in, so I don't want to double up on the phone call. I can just pull up the agenda. I don't really need to see anything, but.
Have we had enough members join now, Don?
We do have 7 now with Mrs. Johnson.
All right, very good.
Mr.
order-
Chair,
Yes, please, yes, sir.
if I may, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Don or Paul, would you guys work with Chad to get him into the meeting? Thank you.
Yep, I'll work with him.
Okay.
The next order of business is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting of December 16th.
Steen moves to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second, please?
Jacobson, second.
Thank you, Dan. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of December 16th. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by following Don. Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes,
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Ridlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes,
That is everyone.
Okay, thank you. The next order of business is the approval of the bills. There are attachments. Page
Actually, I
8.
think, Bernie, approval of the order of the agenda.
My apologies. I already checked it off. Is there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Move to approve by Steen.
Thank you, Rick. Is there a second, please?
Second, Redlinger.
Thank you, Mike. It's been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda. Is there any discussion? Any additions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please, again, Don, please call the roll.
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Ridlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
yes,
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 4 is the approval of the bills. It's in the attachments, page 8. Mr. Costin?
Mr. Costin isn't on the meeting. I can take it. Mike
Mr.
Montplaisir.
Montplaisir, please.
You'll see the biggest bills are from the Diversion Authority or from the Joint Water Resource District, and it's basically land purchases. And then there's some legal fees and some miscellaneous expenses for the director's office, totaling $8,769,07.50.
Thank you,
Steen
Mr.
moves to approve the bills.
We have a motion to approve the bills as submitted. Is there a second?
Redlinger, second.
Thank you, Mike. It's been moved and seconded to approve the bills as presented by Mr. Montplaisir. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don.
Mr. Chair, this is Rick.
Yes, sir.
I did have a question on that, but Kent was not available. And if anybody knows, and I hate to go back on this, but I was going to ask it, but there's a $480,000 or $80,000 credit for refund of funds on OIN 9383. Does anybody know what that might be? I think Eric's on, but
Mr. Montpleasure or Mr. Paulson? Mr. Dodds, anyone?
I looked at that before, and my assumption is that they settled with the party and the clerk of court paid the money back. So in other words,
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would defer to Eric. I don't see him on the line. Oh, he is on. Eric, I'm not sure if you can look that one up for the committee here.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Steen, was that 9383?
9383, correct. 480,000.
I'll have to probably dig into the details of that to explain why. I do know that this is a parcel that we have reached an agreement on. There was some eminent domain actions that had been filed in a court process related to relocation claims. So I can dig into the details of that, of why there'd be a refund. I'm guessing it's just a matter of sort of a shell game of dollars being funded to the court and then extracted and then paid to the property owner, but I'll have to check on that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steen, for the question. Next order of business is a financial report. Mr. Montpleasure?
as you can see on the financial report, our project to date, we have spent $630 million roughly, and we've taken in $728 million, and that's from all the different sources. If you look at the next page, you'll see the difference is basically almost $100 million, and that's what we have on our balance sheet. 88 million in cash and 9.4 million as a receivable from the State Water Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Montpleasure. Are there any questions of Mr. Montpleasure?
On the next page is the approved budget report. We had a budget of 138 million for revenues. We actually didn't take in quite that much. We're about 21 million short. One of the items I want to bring to your attention, it shows under fiscal year to date from Cass County only 12 million. We've budgeted 16 million. There's a couple months that aren't shown in there yet, so that'll even out after a while. And then on the expenditure side, we budgeted to spend 138 million, and as you can see, we spent a little bit more than that. But some of that, I think, is that we have some encumbrances out there when a work order is approved, we encumber it, and that's why it's kind of in the red there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Steen.
I had a couple questions. Unfortunately, I had my mic on mute here a little bit ago. But back on the statement of net position, it's page 18 of the PDF. The 9.4 million receivable from the State Water Commission, I think we had a sizable receivable last time as well, but now it's growing. Is there a timing issue with this, or is there does anybody know why we're so far behind in collecting that?
I believe it takes about 60 to 90 days to get the reimbursement through. They don't get the claim and then write a check. They have to do a lot of review first.
Okay. And then I had another question on page 19. There was a revenue, there's a miscellaneous revenue of 32 million budgeted. Any idea why we've only collected hardly anything? And what that may have been?
Joel, do you know?
I'll probably defer to Paul to see. I don't, with the term miscellaneous. Paul, do you have an explanation?
Not off the top of my head here, but I will look that up and get back with the committee here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Additional questions? Mr. Montplaisir, do you have anything else for us?
That's it. And I'll inquire from Jamie to see what that 32 million is.
Thank you. We'll follow up on both of those two questions that Mr. Steen has asked, and we'll have a follow-up hopefully within the next 24 hours. What is your pleasure on the financial report? Do we have a motion to approve?
I'd prefer to have an answer to the 32 million, but.
Okay, we'll pass on that. If there's a chance that we have that information yet today, we'll come back to that. Item number 6.
Hoping so. Yeah,
item number 6 is the Executive Director's financial report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is really rounding out as of December 25th, I'm sorry, and kind of recapping some of what Mr. Montplaisir had mentioned. You can see total project expenditures to date of 630 million, and you can see how we compared to our forecast year 2020 annual budget of 138, came in at the 104. As you can see, majority of the items are concentrated in 4 categories. The P3 support services, the River Stage 37, which is primarily City of Fargo in-town levy projects, as well as lands and engineering, legal, and financial. Next page, please. So I won't go through these line items in detail, but they are in your packet for comparison. In general, we came in as expected under our budgeted amounts for the projects. So I'm happy to report that we continue to stay on budget. No major concerns in any particular area. I think we move on to the next page here. And you can see, obviously, our lands program, very robust in 2020, purchased quite a bit of land, and we continue to move through a number of those. Just one item to note, the underrunning of the budget in 2020, a majority of those items have been included and added to the 2021 budget, and most of that is related to the timing on the procurement of the land acquisition. So with that, I'll take any questions, but I think in general, very good news.
Could you go to slide number 1 of your report, Joel, with regard to the, there you go, with regard to the expenditures of, slide number 2, excuse me. The expenditures of the, let's see, where is it here? WP-31, the grade raise. The annual budget is what? And the cost to date?
Yes, sir. So that has all been for the design of the I-29 grade raise project. So there was, that did come in over budget for our forecast year 2020. We did escalate that project some, and we utilized HMG to do a number of the design related activities to that, as work in kind for the Corps project. And so, but nothing of particular concern as far as an overall budget on that project. However, the forecast year 2020 fiscal budget did run over on that project.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
This is Rick. I have another question. On page 47 of the PDFs, and I ask this question almost every meeting, so I'm going to ask it. I can't fail now. But the bottom of that page, we've got City of Fargo in-town complimentary work reimbursements, and they're at for the budget. It looks like we're at $22,187,000. We've reached $22,187,000.
Yes, sir.
Does that mean we're done? Just curious.
No, we are not done. That is basically what has come through the books. There's not been any addition. We're anticipating more to be encumbered, but we need to actually that City of Fargo in-town complimentary work. We need to break that down for further granularity, and we're working on doing that in this next calendar year. So that there's several projects within the City of Fargo that up until this time were kind of lumped into that one category. So it's at the end of the year. This is the process of closing out, basically balancing from one year to the next at the end of December here. So you will see additional granularity in that in-town complementary work in the upcoming. So that's why they appear to have been balanced out or closed out.
Yeah. I appreciate the answer, and one thing I've asked before is what is the total amount of the City of Fargo work that is in our budget, and how much we keep adding every year, and I hope we can get some answers to that in the next few months, because we keep adding to it, and I never seem to have a budget that's a total budget. It's compared to our diversion project budget. Thank you.
Joel, would you carry that back to a conversation and work on that with Mr. Costin and Nathan, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chair. And we are working with the City of Fargo on reimbursement MOU agreement to get alignment on that issue and just the process of Fargo's levy budgets, being approved by their commission, being included into their capital improvement program, and the level of oversight of the Diversion Authority, through that process. So that is in the works. It's been in the works for many months, and we continue to work towards executing and getting that document and those processes in place.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. And if you would, please, if you could work on a projected date when we might have that information.
Yes, sir. I will provide that to you.
All right. Next order of business is item number 7. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the first item, for contracting actions, I do have a brief presentation. Jeff Stevens from Oracle is here to present as far as the Aconex Oracle contract, and he has also made himself available for any questions. And once we get done with the presentation and complete with discussion, I would ask for consideration of approval on this item. So, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you if you want to give the committee a brief presentation.
All right, sounds good, Joel. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me all right?
Just fine.
Okay. Fantastic. So here to present today just the details around the ACANX amendment that Joel and I have been working on for the board. So if we could go to the next slide, just from a first statement from Oracle, just to make sure that we're clear that this presentation and proposed amendment, contract amendment, is a compromise offer subject to FRE 408. And the next slide, Joel, if we can go through it, we're going to go ahead and give a little overview of what ACANX is. ACANX is a project information management system used by the program to manage the entire project. ACANX takes a different approach to a typical information system. With ACANX, we have a single neutral cloud platform where all organizations on the project have their own specific space where they can store and manage documents and their project correspondence. Each organization only sees the information they have uploaded to the system, and it is only shared explicitly when when they do so. They can share it with others, and it very much mimics the paper world that if a schematic were sent to a subcontractor, they now have full control of that version and can share it with others. We also have what we refer to as a common data environment. What that means is access across the project. We use a common set of metadata for searching and finding information, as well as standard set of processes for things like RFIs, potential change orders, non-conformance reports, and so on. Data is immediately available to the organization as it is shared, and there's a complete record and audit trail, providing complete visibility, but also accountability amongst project participants. No more possibility to say, I didn't get that email, that attachment must have been too large, so on. The log of events is clear and indisputable. Lastly, ACANX provides worry-free security in that the new organizations are invited to a project, a default level of access is provided, and they manage their own users on the project. ACANX provides equal support to non-paying organizations as they do to procuring org, meaning they don't come to you, they come to us for support. This takes the management overhead off of your shoulders, but also provides the best experience for those non-paying organizations as we help them get up and running, driving adoption of ACANX on the project. Next slide. So from a contractual perspective, we have an ACANX project here, ACANX contract executed with Fargo-Moorhead Diversion Authority. But we have two different types of contracts. The first type is a user-based contract, which is the most typical contracting methodology, where you pay for the number of users on a project, including your project team, owners, etc. The second type that we have for ACANX, which is a little different, is a total program project cost contract. This offering includes unlimited users, and the fee is based on the total program value of the project and the duration of that project. The fee rate percentage is multiplied against the contract value and is illustrated in the graph and is illustrated in the graphic. The rate lowers as the project cost or program cost increases. The best contracting methodology for large programs with ACANX is the total program cost module. This is especially advantageous from an owner's perspective. It allows you to have one system of record where all project participants are collaborating. And with this type of contract, you don't have to worry about limiting usage because this is an unlimited user model. Next slide, please. From a project timeline, I thought it would be good to explain the timeline of where we are with the contract, how we got to where we are. Initially, and a lot of this information, I'll say, was pulled from your publicly available website. So initial cost estimates for the Fargo-Moorhead project were put at approximately $1.8 billion in 2011. In February 2016, CH2M Hill executed an ACANX agreement for a pilot phase of ACANX. In March of 2016, the program cost was updated to $2.2 billion. And in July of 2016, ACANX executed a new contract for $1.5 billion for 8 years, July 2016 through July 24, with the Flood Diversion Authority. In December of 2017, ACANX, which was its own entity at the time, was acquired by Oracle. And in December of 2018, the program cost estimate publicly was updated to $2.7 billion. Oracle, in a discovery meeting with the project team in May of 2020, the project team reached out to Oracle about some additional functions and features that they wanted to add for the project. As part of this discovery process, we noted that the project cost had increased, and we brought that to the team's attention. All right, so if we go to the next slide, please. So looking at the original contract, the original program cost that we had estimated was a $1.5 billion program for 8 years, and that's directly from the ordering documents engagement scope. The payments for this amount due were approximately $1.3 million over that 8-year term of the agreement, which this is less than approximately $166,000 per year. And this fee has been discounted on the already favorable program project value rates. As of today, the program value was raised to $2.9 billion, approximately $2 billion excluding federal scope of work. And per the contract terms, when this scope of the project or the program material increases, ACANX is entitled to additional proportional fees for that additional use. So in our discussion, we also identified the legacy contract issues that we need to discuss. So as we've talked about with Joel and John throughout this discussion, we've identified that there's some ambiguity what is meant by program cost and what is actually included in the Fargo diversion program according to the contract. There's also no price holds in the agreement. If the project duration increases, there's no handling of appropriation of funds, or the current contract does not address any non-appropriation to the project. And there's also some project execution risk. The current contract does not account for a project execution strategy shift. Example, if you guys have to move from a P3 to a design build contract. So the next slide, please. So what we've been talking with Joel and the team about over the last couple of months is working to an amendment that addresses the following areas. So our key proposed amendment items are first, removing the federal scope of the project. So what that is of the program cost estimate, instead of being $2.9 billion, we're incorporating the 2.7 from the project partnership agreement. Oracle has also added an additional $293 million of project cost for growth upon receiving the P3 bids at no additional cost. We've added a non-appropriation clause in case funds are not appropriated for the project. We've also added a termination in favor clause that allows you to change your contract or your contract execution if your project strategy changes from a P3 to a design build, et cetera. We've also added a 3-year renewal with an option to extend monthly beyond July 2027. These fees are discounted less than the current annual rate, and fees for the project cost growth are aligned with the current payment cycle. So from the table perspective, if I read the table, we've now got the current project program cost at about $2.9 billion. As I mentioned, $2.007 billion from the project partnership agreement. The original program cost that we had identified from the scope was $1.5 billion. So now with the non-federal program cost being about $2.3 billion, we're adding with the $293 million of growth, we have an additional program cost of $800 million. So that fee for that cost with the additional discount that we've added to this is now $409,000, which has been aligned with your payment structure. So $184,000, $359 due net 30, and then another $224,000, 828 due in July 22, which is in alignment with the current payment structures. And again, just to reiterate, per the available amendment, we are including a contract extension through July 27th with an option to renew monthly if the project or program extends beyond that term. So With that, Joel, that's what I've got.
Thank you, Jeff. So, Mr. Chair, I think we'll open it up for any questions that the committee might have, and Jeff and I will attempt to answer those to the best of our ability.
Does anybody in the committee have questions for Mr. Stevens or Mr. Paulson?
Steen does.
Okay, Mr. Steen.
All right, thanks. Just a quick question. So, trying to figure out what was the original estimated cost of this contract for this information? Is 400 and some odd thousand, maybe, if I'm reading this correctly?
Joel, if you go to the previous slide, the original amount was $1.5 billion. That was
no. The cost of ours. So the original cost was $1.5 million.
No, your original.
What was our original cost of the service, the cloud service?
The original cost was $1.3 million over 8 years.
And now it is, after all said and done, what's the total cost of that service?
It'd be that 1.3 plus the additional 800,000 in the amendment, Commissioner Steen.
So $2.1 million for cloud services.
That's correct.
And the original contract was picked up by CH2M Hill, is that correct?
There was two contracts. There was a pilot that was done by CH2M Hill, which lasted for approximately 6 months. And then you guys executed with a Metro Flood Diversion Authority executed agreement in July of 2000. I'm sorry, I got to go back to the slide. I don't remember it off the top of my head. July of 2016, an 8-year deal, 8-year covering through July of 2024.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is all of this, Joel, is all of this contemplated in our budget? I mean, we've got a $100,000 increase in costs. And besides assuming, the contingencies, is this in our costs?
So, Commissioner Steen, to answer your question, there is contingency in our administrative costs that this would not provide pressure as far as going over budget for the program capital costs. But this particular amendment was not anticipated. I think we had based our ACONEX payment off of the existing contract. So it is an addition to that line item for the program administration. It is not applying significant pressure to that.
Okay. And that's, I think at the last meeting we talked about trying to update all of our budget numbers because, I hear, at least I listened to this, it's like, well, we've got this increase, that's not much. We've got this increase, that's not much. But we never really see a summary of all of our increases compared to our $2.8 million budget. I think, that's in the minutes we have, and I know we're waiting for P3, obviously. But I think it's becoming critical, and we see increases like, 900,000, and it's not that significant, so I'm just, and again, with the city increases and all that we're doing there, it just starts to concern me that we don't, at least I don't, as a finance committee member, have a good grasp on what our project cost is in, compared to our 2,000 or 2.8 million. So sooner you can get that done, the better from my perspective anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner Steen. So you mentioned the P3 procurement. That's going to provide overall program financial clarity once we get that turn the crank on our financial plan and adjust budgets as necessary, and that will provide that clarity. I can work with Paul to get something interim, taking into account estimates, with the P3 portion of the project. obviously that's the significant portion, the largest single contract that we'll execute. And so it tends to skew the project more than, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying smaller items, but because 900,000 is 900,000, it's but when you're comparing it to the overall program cost, it's a smaller number than what we're dealing with the P3. So not quite sure, Paul, how we best want to capture what Commissioner Steen is requesting. We do provide some information for you, Commissioner, and the chair, to kind of review on a monthly basis where, we're tracking things of significant concern. That's really where probably that'd be the best place to go back to. But we'll work on that and, certainly try to give you that holistic picture that you're looking for.
That would be great, Joel. Thanks.
Yeah.
A question or a comment, I guess, on my side. I agree that we really should see where these are going to be paid from, and how it fits into our overall budget. Again, like we stated, it's easy to say that these are small here and there, and then we don't know exactly how that eats up in the contingency. So I would like also to see that accounting of these extra costs.
Thank you, Ms. McCall. Joel, I would respectfully request that we have at least your best efforts or preliminary before our next meeting, that the Finance Committee can see it prior to the meeting, at least 4 to 5 days again, so we can prepare for questions.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any additional questions for Mr. Paulson or Mr. Stevens? Joel, you've been talking to the committee about this for some time, that you were in negotiations with Oracle with regard to this. So can you give us an idea from what their original proposal was to what we've landed on today?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we have been in, kind of a long-term negotiations with Oracle. We did start at a higher number. Oracle does recognize the removal of the federal component out of the program, and they have since based this proposed amendment off of a program cost, of services, that we do utilize the system for. The original agreement was signed, in 2016, as had indicated, and it was, based off of total program cost with some deductions. We are seeing I guess, a larger discount rate with this amendment overall for the program. So I view that as a very positive development. It is based off of the same principles of how the original agreement was submitted and approved by the Diversion Authority Board. We do use ACONEX for everything. It is the project record. And Mr. Stevens had mentioned some of the beneficial things as far as a log of activities, a solid record, safe place for the documents to be stored, and it's all auditable. So it's integrated into our day-to-day activities for the program, and it is a valuable resource for the Diversion Authority. John Shockley's reviewed from a legal perspective, and I won't comment on that, but John, maybe you'd like to make a comment. I don't believe he found any issues, and we have negotiated the commercial terms to the greatest extent possible, I believe. So, but I wanted to have Jeff on the line in case there were any additional questions related to Aconex, so he could answer those firsthand.
Thank you. As Mr. Paulson, John, do you have any comments?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't have any additional comments. I think Joel covered it pretty well.
All right, thank you. As indicated when Joel started his presentation with regard to the Oracle presentation, he would like you'd like an actionable item on this, would you not, Joel?
Yes, sir. This would need to be recommended for approval, but to the DA board, if the Finance Committee so chose.
Finance Committee, your pleasure.
This is Carla. Again, without knowing how it's going to be paid for or to see that how it fits in the budget, that's a pretty sizable number to not have a budget area for it. It's hard to approve something when we don't know how it's going to affect the overall budget.
Thank you, Ms. McCall.
Mr. Chair, this is Rick.
Mr. Steen, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that, when we look at the overall big budget, this is not a huge item, and I get that, and I know it's going to fit in with the admin budget somewhere within the contingencies, and I understand that. I don't want to hold this up because of that concern, but what my concern is that we keep doing this over and over and over again, and we don't see anything. And so I'm willing to suggest, yeah, we go ahead and approve this, but we need, at least I can't speak for everybody, I would like to see better accountability for where these numbers are going every time we have an increase and how that affects the budget. I know these appear small to, the rest of us dealing with a $2.75 billion project, but we start, 800,000 here, 800,000 there, million here, million there. It all adds up, and I think that's the job of the Finance Committee to find out, well, that's great. Where is this all going to land? But again, for this one, I'm not suggest we hold this up. I understand we need it. When you get to $2.1 million services, I'm guessing we could have probably gone out and bid this out if we knew it was 2.1 billion with more than one vendor. We're at where we're at, and I just want some accounting for this to make sure we just keep lumping things in the contingent basket and figure we're going to cover it. That's all. That's what I'm getting at.
Points well taken. Thank you, Mr. Steen.
Would it be great if someone else made the motion?
Did you need a second, Mayor Mahoney?
No, I didn't make a motion. Need a motion.
I do not have a motion.
Peterson motion.
Commissioner Peterson makes the motion. Is there a second?
Mahoney makes the second.
Mahoney makes the second.
Noting the concerns of Commissioner Steen.
We have a motion to approve the amendment of the Oracle contract. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in, Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Rudlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen. Mr. Steen.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Again, Mr. Paulson, we would ask that the comments that is noted that this was approved and recommended to the Diversion Authority Board with the comments too. Thank you. Please continue, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next two items I think could somewhat be taken together. They're both contracting packages for demolition within the channel area. You can see those were competitively bid. Industrial builders won both of those packages. and maybe, Mr. Chair, I'll go through the rest of these and take questions all at one time just to speed things along a little bit. Task Order 1, Amendment number 17 is 2021 Services for Project Management, Public Assistance, Project Controls for HMG. This is an annual task order that we execute with HMG for their project management services related to all of their different work that they're working on for the project, all of their miscellaneous task orders. So this would be to add budget for 2021 and extend the period of performance to December 31st, 2021 for those services. The next one is a new services agreement for government relations services. This is with GA Group in Bismarck. They are assuming a role of support services for the legislative session for the Diversion Authority, and that would be a new agreement for $60,000. And the last one is a new services agreement for 2021 audit services with Eide Bailly. Eide Bailly did perform our 2020 audit, and which came in significantly under budget. And so this agreement is in line with the work that they did in 2020, in an appropriate budget amount being proposed at $20,000. So with that, I'll take any questions related to any of the board approval contracting actions.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Any questions for Mr. Paulson?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Steen.
I must have had too much time to read all this stuff today, but anyway, just a quick question on those contract awards for demos. You know, how can not? This is a crazy question, but did all the contractors get the same RFP? You know, the price differentials are huge. That second one is almost 3 times different. I'm just curious if you guys note anything or see this. And I mean, Linden Company 815, Industrial Builders 289. Again, don't expect to have a magic ball here. I'm just curious as to any discussion that you guys had internally with what's going on there.
I would defer to Paul Barthel if you have any insight for Commissioner Steen.
I actually do have some good insight on this one. And this is in every bid package, we give the contractors the ability to either salvage and resell and move them off the site or demolish the buildings. This IBI, Industrial Builders, to my understanding, has several buyers already in place, and they're planning to actually just move the buildings and then regain some of the cost through selling the buildings themselves. So it's something that we've provided in these contracts to allow the contractors to do and keep the prices low so they can recoup some of the costs. So that's a win for the Diversion Authority, and it also helps keep these buildings out of the landfills. And so that's also, we felt that was also a win. So the appearance, the differential in those bids is that I think you could assume the other 2 bids were just looking at demolishing the buildings, whereas this company is looking to resell some of the buildings.
Outstanding. Great answer. I had one other question too. I probably am lost here in my worksheets, but the $60,000 contract for lobbying, who is that exactly?
So GA Group is a consulting company in Bismarck focused on the North Dakota legislature. It's the team is being led by Levi Andrist. He's a very notable lobbyist in Bismarck. Been around for many years.
Is he the one who worked for the governor we had in our meetings quite often?
Mr. Chairman?
No, Commissioner Steen. This is a different Levi.
Yeah. A different Levi. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mahoney.
Yeah, Joel, I think what Rick's bringing up is normally when we pick a lobbyist, we have an internal discussion because we have Bernie Dardis and his expertise with the legislative team. Sometimes I think the group would have liked to have a discussion if this was the best pick, and I sometimes would rely on other people's interaction with the Bismarck people. And I'm assuming you had talked to the chair of finance when you made this pick, because just to some of us, we have to be extremely careful whoever we pick for lobby of City of Fargo, because we want them to be smarter and brighter than the West Fargo guy. So, there's some politics in it. So I just think that I think, Rick, maybe you had the same concern I had, is we had a discussion about it and make sure that we're all concurrent on this is a good selection.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Mayor. And just to clarify, so GA Group is not the face of the Diversion Authority with the legislature. However, they're doing bill review. They are tracking items of importance as far as legislative strategy for funding for the diversion, as well as a number of other items. And so lobbying is kind of a misnomer for this agreement. In fact, we've kind of placed the GA Group as a special counsel in reporting to Mr. Shockley, and so it's more of having eyes and ears in Bismarck, but not necessarily the face. The face continues to be myself representing the Diversion Authority with the legislature, but it was the team agreed we needed some assistance. Obviously the legislative session has started and is in full swing. And so we have, been utilizing and seeing some support services from GA at this point under Onstead Twitchell. And this would be our opportunity to execute an agreement directly with GA Group to continue those services directly to the DA. So hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity as far as how this group would be used, and they are not out lobbying on our behalf as the face of the diversion project. That remains myself. So.
But Joel, if you look at that from our perspective, you only have one issue: is we have the Diversion Authority and its water area. City of Fargo, West Fargo, all the cities have multiple different issues in which the legislative people want to stick their fingers in. You have a good commitment by Schmidt on this bond bill that we have our financing. So it's just hard for some of us to understand why we would have to hire a lobbying group when it's a fairly small focus. And I'm not teasing about Bernie Dardis. Bernie does have great connections, so it'd be unusual that something would come along that we wouldn't know about. Schneider Services, T-Hill, not A2S, has been, kind of lighten up what's happening, and we have Brent in there too. So the question that some of us would ask, why would we need a separate lobbyist for the DA when we have one item, one issue, and we have you, John, Martin, we have a variety of people all the way in the stand taking care of these things. What is it that you think you'll miss that you need this group for?
Well, in some respects, Mayor, this group is doing some of the scope items that A2S has done for the diversion project in the past, and they're no longer doing moving into the future here. But I think from the perspective of only one ask, it's a critical ask for the project, and we need to ensure that we have the support in the resources to assure success in our funding ask, especially given the delicate nature of executing the P3 agreement this spring and rounding out our financial plan. And, knowing that the legislature only meets every 2 years, failure at the legislature to acquire the funding necessary, would certainly cause disruption in our budgeting and our financial plan, as well as some uncertainty for items that have been identified that would be moved to later in the construction. So it's an absolutely critical, ask of the legislature this session. And we've determined GA Group that they're uniquely positioned to provide the resources that we need to execute our mission and achieve our goal with the state legislature.
If I could, the GA Group is certainly one of the most respected teams in that type of business, well respected. The point that, and this falls within the purview of obviously the executive director to make this decision for the dollar amount. Any of us that have always been involved in the legislative process, we all understand how quickly things move, how amendments are offered, or how discussions go. And the difference being with the type of ask that we have for the atmosphere that is at the legislature this year, due to the dollar amounts and the whole bonding question, I agree with Joel that we need boots on the ground. Now, could that be Joel out there 4 days a week? Could that be Martin out there 4 days a week, or XYZ as far as members of our board? But the fact of the matter is, as quickly as things change, as how dialogues go in the committee meetings and the like, you need somebody that's constantly vigilant to see if there's a switch or change going. Did you observe what happened today in the House with the bonding bills? Some of the discussion there, all tied to, or even our financing tied to the bonding bill, if it passes. So this is a critical time. We're at the end of our asks with the legislature, and I would agree that we need boots on the ground in Bismarck 5 days a week. So that being said, Mr. Andrus and his team are absolutely top notch, and they are absolute professionals, some of the best in the business. So, any other additional questions of Mr. Paulson on the contracting actions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think I recall that last year we were in a rush to get audit services, and so we went with Eide Bailly without doing any kind of RFP for services. And I thought that the discussion was that we would try to do something like that and actually do an RFP this year. So I'm questioning the audit service agreement.
All right, thank you, Ms. McCall. That was prior to my tenure on the board, so I defer to Mr. Paulson on that.
Yeah, good question, Carla. And there was some discussion concerning that. Since that time, Eide Bailly they did complete the audit for about half of what was quoted for the 2020 audit services. And, we saw significant savings due to Eide Bailly's relationship in performing the audit for the city of Fargo. When the discussion concerning the 2021 audit services came up, Mr. Costin and I, had a discussion about the use of Eide Bailly and the significant cost savings that it would provide to the Diversion Authority. due to their intimate knowledge of the city of Fargo. And since the city of Fargo is the fiscal agent for the Diversion Authority, there's a lot of parallels there as well. I believe, if we went out for RFP services, Eide Bailly is uniquely positioned to more than likely, win that work anyway. And due to the cost savings that we saw last year with their knowledge of the city of Fargo already, I don't want to speak for Mr. Costin, but I think the general consensus between our discussion was Eide Bailly would provide the best value for the Diversion Authority for the 2021 audit services.
If I might reply, this is obviously just a very, very small drop in the bucket, but it's important to have an independent auditor that comes and looks at the books. And I'm not so sure they can be considered independent when they're already doing the Fargo's books. And even though you're saying there's a savings because of that, this is where you want services where they go in and they actually have a new set of eyes looking at things. So I would just recommend at some point that you actually do an RFP and don't just look at cost in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCall.
Is Mr. Costin on the meeting today?
He wasn't earlier.
Yeah, I don't think he was. Well, I think that's a good discussion, and I don't know if there's any additional direction from the Finance Committee on that. I mean, it's early enough in the year, we could certainly pull this, run an RFP, analyze proposal. I think it would be, to Carla's concern, we would look for qualifications-based selection, and instantly run it that way as well. So I don't know if the committee wants to provide any direction to change course of action from what's being proposed today.
Committee members?
Moving on.
All right, Joel, anything else on the board approval contract actions?
No, Mr. Chair, that is all I have.
Would you like these to be action items, items 2 through 6?
Yes, sir, that would be just fine. Yep.
Committee members, if we could have a motion for your consideration on items 2 through 6.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is Steen. I recommend I move we recommend that the board approve items 2 through 6.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Moved and seconded to approve items 2 through 6 on the DA board approval contract actions as presented by Mr. Paulson. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, what is the cost of the lobbyist service? I don't have a video here.
$60,000, Mayor.
How much?
$60,000.
$60,000?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm gonna have to go back and look at our contract with our lobbyists. I don't think we're paying that much, but okay.
Is there any further discussion? Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Durdis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
No.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
No.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Moving on, Executive Director, approved contract actions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are just the report outs. The first one is the Houston Moore Group property mitigation budget transfer. That's a zero budget increase. We're just moving some encumbrance on that task order. Task order 2, amendment 2, phase 2 architectural evaluations. That is an additional amendment for AECOM to perform additional architectural evaluations necessary for our environmental work. Task Order 1, Amendment 9 is related to the Work Package 50C, the property structure mitigation. That is a geotechnical item with Braun Inspec. And then the last one was Task Order 20, Amendment 7, additional work for the I-29 grade raise, adding to Houston Moore's design work on that project. So I'll take any questions if there are any.
Questions for Mr. Paulson? All right. My understanding is those are non-actionable items, just to report out.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
All right. The next are the Cass County Joint Water Resource District approved contract actions. Mr. Paulson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a majority of these are related to the 2021 work that our land agents and land companies are doing for the Cass County Joint Board. And so this is adding budget for their work for this year. Nothing real in particular. These have all been approved by Cass County Joint. And again, just for informational purposes, I can attempt to answer any questions if the Finance Committee has any.
Questions from the Finance Committee? All right, thank you. Move on to the next one, please.
Okay, and these are also for the MCC JPA, very similar to what I just mentioned for the Cass County Joint Board. So this is encumbering 2021 budget dollars for our land agents to continue their work with the MCC JPA.
Any questions for Mr. Paulson? All right, thank you. Item number 8. Item number 8 is other business. The first on that is the WIFIA term sheet. Mr. Shockley, please.
Being respectful of everyone's time, I just wanted to give the board a brief update that on Friday, January 15th, the WIFIA term sheet was formally approved by Office of Management and Budget and the EPA Administrator. That means the consequence of that is quite significant. That means $569 million along with the interest credit subsidy has been quote unquote appropriated by Office of Management and Budget and set aside, which means that all we need to do now to access that is to close on the WIFIA loan. We're currently set to close on the WIFIA loan in the first part of May. The reason that we're formally closing in May is due to the fact that we have to accept the P3 bid as a condition to closing. So the interest rate will be one basis point above the Treasury rate, which we're estimating right now to be between 1.6 to 1.9% for the term of the loan, which is 40 years. So pretty good interest rate, pretty good term. So we got only one small step left to do is close the loan. So.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there any questions of Mr. Shockley? I would like a motion to approve the term sheet from the Finance Committee, please.
Steen moves to approve.
Thank you,
Jacobson,
Mr.
second.
Thank you, Dan. Been moved and seconded to approve the WIFIA term sheet as presented by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order is the Diversion Authority's board approval of a memorandum of understanding and agreement actions. Mr. Shockley.
Good afternoon. I believe the first one is regarding the West Fargo MOU. The MOU is between the City of West Fargo and the Diversion Authority. I won't, respecting everybody's time, it covers a lot of ground regarding the crossings, the infrastructure that goes under the diversion channel, the allocation of responsibilities, access to a certain parcel owned by West Fargo, and then also distributing some of the dirt that is generated by the digging of the diversion channel. This was approved by the City of West Fargo at its last City Commission meeting. It is consistent with the directions regarding the project, and it is within our budget allocation for the MOUs. I can certainly answer any questions, but don't want to take hours of your time away from you.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley? Please continue with the Magellan Pipeline reimbursement agreement, John.
Okay, the Magellan pipeline, this is a reimbursement for some preliminary engineering costs that are associated with putting the pipeline underneath the diversion channel. You'll recall we did this with New Star, and that is in relation to the when you move a pipeline, you have to go through the PUC to get clearance to put the pipe in. And so that's part of their preliminary engineering and research and submission. This is an item that we need to undertake in order to get the channel constructed, because the pipe has to go underneath the channel and the embedded levee. Once again, this is an item that is contained within the project budget for utility relocations.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley?
This is Steen. I have one question on page 448. It's on the budget number, and I know we ran into this before, but it talks about a budget. Then it goes on to talk about, but if they run into more, we have to pay them more. I mean, there's really no way to control this, or is there? That's my question.
Well, the problem that we have with the utilities, we try our best to control the costs, but it is within they have an existing easement, and we manage it as best we can, but there are certain times that the costs may go over, and that's why we try to identify the amount of the budget, and then they have to provide us notification if they are intending to go over that amount. We're trying to manage it as best as we can. The third-party utilities are always a challenge. I know Martin can, maybe elaborate on that more, but it's always a challenge to control these costs with utility relocations.
So the answer to my question was no, there's really no way we can.
Not to any degree of certainty that we would like. Most of the utilities for the channel are the relocations are going to be managed by the P3 developer. And so that will help to control some of the costs. It gives an incentive to the P3 developer to control those costs, but they also face some of the same problems. And in large projects, these utility relocates are always a wild card, so to speak.
All right, thanks, John.
Yeah, just one other quick comment that most utilities have a preferred vendor that they like to use, and that is they have confidence in handling their particular utility. And so there's very limited ability to get out and truly bid these in a way that would be competitive. And, you know, as the utility owner, they probably have that right. Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. Any additional questions of Mr. Shockley or Mr. Nicholson? All right. This is an actionable item. We'll take them both. Item 1, the City of West Fargo MOU and the Magellan Pipeline Reimbursement Agreement. A motion, please.
This is Steen. I'll move to approve items 1 and 2 as discussed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second, please?
Mike Montplaisir, second.
Thank you, Mike. It's been moved and seconded to approve these 2 action items as discussed by and presented by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Don, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Mahoney? Yes.
Mahoney. Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order of business is the Diversion Authority Contracting Resolution. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item, this is an updated resolution. Currently, the Diversion Authority has a resolution in place with contracting authority given to the executive director. There's a little bit of history behind this. Back in 2016, the Diversion Authority first adopted this resolution, and it allowed the executive director to make purchases up to, at that time it was the co-deputy executive directors, up to $150,000 using the appropriate contracting procedures and requirements laid out in the resolution. When the project went into hibernation due to the injunction, there was a decision made that to reduce that purchasing authority down to $10,000. And a comment by the board at that time was made that we would revisit this amount when the project was back up and running because of the daily expenditures that we anticipated would come into play. I tried to calendar this item, and as a result, thought that since the project is really coming online now, I would bring it back for the board's consideration. We didn't include the red lines because the packet was already 500 pages, so we just included the clean version. But essentially, during that time period, we also had the legislature increase the bidding threshold from $150,000 to $200,000. And so that's why it reflects the $200,000 threshold. So this would give the executive director the authority to enter into contracts up to $200,000. That the executive director would, of course, have to report back to the board, just like with some of the other contracting actions. But this was something that for 2 reasons, I decided to bring forward. Number one was it was just based upon the input from the board at the time. It was appropriate to bring it back for board consideration. And then number 2, there's a significant ramp up in the activity level that's coming before the board. And so it seemed appropriate to bring it forward for discussion by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley?
Mr. Chair, Rick here.
Christine.
Say, I had a fair number of, I'll call picky questions on this, and I don't want to hold the group up on this deal. And John, is there a real sense of urgency on getting this thing approved at this meeting, or could we do it the next meeting? John? Or Joel or somebody? Hello?
We hear you, Commissioner. John, did you make a comment on that? You're the one that brought this. I'm not sure timing is
I mean, I'll
maybe
be
not an
willing to
issue.
do it, but it's going to take a while, and these are really picky questions. And I just think I could do it offline with Joel and or John and just go through these and get them, up to speed by next meeting. If there's no sense of urgency on getting this done today. I think John must be froze.
Yeah, I think we just lost John.
I think he is. Commissioner, let's try to get John back on. I'm not sure. Yeah, I want to make sure he has an opportunity to address that. This is something he brought forward, so I knew it was in the works, but he was the one that brought it forward for particular reasons, I guess. So, but I think in general, the finance committee meetings aren't going to get any shorter moving forward here. We're going to continue to have pretty robust agendas through 2021. I think in some aspects this was an avenue.
Well, like I said, I'm willing to go through it today, but it's going to take a while, and I'm more than happy just to get offline and talk to somebody about some of my questions and get them resolved.
Sure.
Whatever your pleasure is, Mr. Chair.
Is this an action item that needs because of timing?
Yes.
I realize it's an action item. What about timing?
I didn't. When I read it, I didn't see any urgency on this. Otherwise, as John said, I thought I'd bring it up now because it was a good time to do it. And maybe he's back online.
He's getting on now, Commissioner.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, he better not be able to bill us for this. He's offline.
Sorry, I'm back online now.
John, are you back online?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I bring up billing and John's right responsive.
John, my question was, is this something that needs to be done today, or can we wait till next meeting? Because I have a fair number of, I'll call it kind of picky questions or comments, and I'm not sure I want to hold up everybody just to go through that if this isn't, urgent that we get it done this meeting.
This is not a mission critical item. It could wait till next meeting, and if you have comments, I'm happy to sit down and answer them or answer them by email.
Right, and this, of course, was towards the end of 500 some odd pages, and so I didn't have a chance to call you.
Understand.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, well, I'm going to have to defer to the finance committee.
Okay, I'm just going to move to table.
All right. Is there a second? Is there a second?
My pleasure. Second.
Been moved and second to table the Diversion Authority contracting resolution as presented today by Mr. Shockley. Is there any discussion on tabling it?
I don't think you can have a discussion on the table item.
Yeah, you're right. Don, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Dirtis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney. Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you. The motion passes. This item is tabled till the next meeting. Next order of business is the policy on the disposition and management of the comprehensive project. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might ask Martin to run through this item. This was presented at the Lands Committee prior to Finance. It pertains to how we treat and what we do with our excess lands. I think Martin facilitated a very good discussion with the Lands Committee. Martin, I'll turn it over to you and let you run through this, and then we can take any comments or questions from Finance. The Lands Committee did not move this forward to the board this month, so I think we got a lot of great comments from the committee as far as policy is concerned, and we we intend to take that back, take the guidance we got from the Lands Committee back, and update and submit this for consideration next month. So, Martin, if you'd like to run the Finance Committee through this, please.
Yeah, I guess, Mr. Chair, given the time and the fact that the Lands Committee did not advance this as a recommendation to the board, it's at your pleasure whether you want to do a review now or have folks read this, and happy to receive comments directly. I'm just conscious of the hour. It will take a little time to move through this and go through a discussion.
Just at a very, very high level, the discussion by the Lands Committee has been very extensive, and the Executive Committee. There's a couple of items that the Lands Committee felt that they needed tweaking. So, Martin, if you will, just very, very high level, some of the highlights of what this discussion's been about.
Okay, happy to do that. I'll try to be brief. As Joel mentioned, this is the policy on disposition and management of excess lands. Excess lands in general are those lands that are determined by the authority to no longer be needed for the operation, management, mitigation, or use by the diversion authority. If we could scroll down to the second page. Stop right there, please. Looking at 1.5. Up just a little bit. There are essentially 4 high priorities. Refrain from selling land at less than market value. Provide preference to prior landowners. And of course, with consideration for any agreements that was made in the original purchase agreement to the prior landowner. The third is to provide preference for adjacent property owners. And as Chairman Dardis indicated, there was significant discussion at Lands about when and how that should apply and whether it should apply in all cases. And I believe the modifications to this policy moving forward would be to provide a carve out for circumstances where that didn't apply very well. And a lot was talked about in city limits and in the city of Fargo, where they have some ordinances which present a challenge. So I think we're going to be looking at modifying there. And the last is to eventually sell or exchange all excess lands at a time when it is in the best interests of the authority to do so. Concept behind that is generally that the diversion authority will not be in the land business. They're in the flood control business. And unless that land is needed, there's no intent to hold it long term, but to sell or exchange it when it's in the best interest of the authority to get that process done. There are provisions in here for the mechanics of how these processes will work. I can take some time, Chairman, to go through those, or leave it at that kind of high level for people to look at and provide comments. I will just make the comment that this is drafted in a manner that allows the executive director to administer the policy. And so the eyes and ears, so to speak, of the board and of the committees is Joel as the executive director. And so he would be making recommendations to the board where necessary, and would assume that he would implement the policy in compliance with the board direction. I think the largest discussion items were regarding the carve out for adjacent landowners. Other changes we discussed were the possibility of member entities retaining strips of land or retaining pieces of property that they may have to get later through other means, and there'll be some updates for that in this policy. I believe those would be reimbursed by the entity to the diversion authority. John, help me out with the other modifications that we talked about.
We're going to modify it slightly to account for city-owned property.
Yep.
Specifically, a difference for adjacent landowners on city-owned property or property within the city.
And there were some other minor cleanups, definition of taxing authority being all taxing jurisdictions, not just the benefit of the county.
Thank you, Martin. That's a great summary. Due to the fact that this was not brought forward by the Lands Committee, but it is on our agenda, I would also respectfully request from the Finance Committee that we table this one.
Steen moves to table.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to table it. Don, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson. Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Property acquisition status report, Mr. Dodds.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dardis, committee members. I'll be brief. You have the status report in your packet. Happy to answer any questions if you have any. I would just point out on the page on the screen here that we have acquired the property rights necessary for the channel. You'll notice there's a few blue shaded parcels in the channel. Those are parcels that we aim to have a purchase agreement signed later this week. So we've met the expectations of the P3 process, and a lot of sweat and hard work and tears have gone into that. So good progress being made. I would also just point out that collectively between the voluntary agreements and then those parcels that we have had to use in eminent domain action, we have almost 600 parcels acquired as of now, and continue to be making progress in areas beyond the channel as we look forward to the portions of the southern embankment, including the Red River control structure and the Drain 27 wetland project. Happy to answer any questions. I guess the remainder of the report goes through and drills into more details. One item I would just address, there was a question at the Land Committee about the deposits that have been made for the eminent domain actions are captured in the budget amounts shown on the subsequent pages of this report. And so just wanted to be clear that those parcels that are shown in red on the map here have a dollar amount that was deposited with the court, and those dollars are captured in the budget thermometers on the following pages. Happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you, Mr. Dodds. Any questions? Next order of business is the Diversion Authority Program Information Points. Jennifer?
So I just want to share that the informational points in the packet are just something to help keep us on track with the information. It's being shared with all of the committees and the board tomorrow. So if you can read through it, there's a lot of information there, I know, but at least it gives a really good overview of where we're at with the project. It might answer any questions that you have, and if you think of anything else that you feel might be needed, please share that back with me, and I'll be happy to make updates in the future, but this should give you a really good baseline of where the project is at right now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions of Jennifer? All right, going back to item number 5, Paul, were you able to find any additional information on the financial report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Looking back at that on the miscellaneous, that was actually a combination of $800,000 of miscellaneous income and then just under $31 million of cash carryover from the 2019 budget. So the reason that the difference fiscal year to date is so large is that the cash carryover was really not included in any income. It was just as a revenue source there. So we have brought in basically 13,000 of the 800,000 that we estimated for miscellaneous income.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Steen, any additional questions?
No, thanks. I did get that answered. Just a quick question though. On $90-some million of cash, where does the interest income go?
My understanding is that it goes back into that account.
So that's not an income for the project then?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'd have to double check with Kent on how he allocates that, if he puts that to a separate line item, if there's a funding code that he allocates that interest to.
If you would, please, Paul. That's a great question, Rick.
Yep. Mr. Chair, one quick reminder, once the master indenture of trust is put in place, interest on any fund will be credited to that fund, which is held by the project. So, but that'll be once we implement the master indenture of trust.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Is there anything else?
Steen moves to approve the financial statements as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
On pleasure, second.
Been moved and second to approve the financial report as presented with comments. Don, will you please read the roll?
Mayor Dirtis.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
And that is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Our next meeting will be February 24th. I would like to thank the committee for their patience this afternoon. We have a lot of items, and as it's been stated before, with all of the work that's going to be forthcoming in 2021, we're going to have to be very, very efficient with our time. So I thank you very much. We stand adjourned.